What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Valley Vibes, where we talk all things Suns, NBA, culture, and more. Today, Flex and I are joined by Ryan Bawek, NBA history author. You wrote the Ultimate NBA History and What If book series. You can see them here. These are hefty books.
Yeah, very
Lots of information in all of these books. So give us kind of the overview of the series and how you came about writing it.
Yeah, so I was writing for Valley of the Suns, kind of on the side, early COVID 2020. And I wrote an article that was, what if the Suns won the coin flip for the first pick in 1969? For, we know him as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but he was Lou Alcindor then.
Right.
That's right.
And I really went down the rabbit hole, wrote like a 2,000-word article about that, talking about this whole alternate universe of what the 70s in the NBA would look like if the Suns had gotten Kareem, how the whole, how the league could have shifted entirely. So I did that. I wrote it. My brother's another NBA almanac, just like me. And he said, hey, this is the best thing you've written. You should turn this into a book about what ifs. And I was like, well, it's COVID. I'm a real estate agent. Not a lot going on. Why don't I do this? And then from there, it kind of evolved, and I bit off way more than I could chew into doing the Ultimate NBA History and What If book series. So it turned into 4 books, 2,500 pages.
Wow.
And then I break down the history of every NBA franchise chapter by chapter in the first 3 books, from their inception to the 21-22 season, because I published it like November 2022.
Okay.
And then just did one more book ranking players of different eras and teams and all sorts of stuff like that. And yeah, it was probably 1,000 hours worth of YouTube footage and basketball reference.
The amount of research going into this.
Early mornings, late nights, but I knew I wanted to finish it. And it was something I started writing it at home. I was with my mom. She was dealing with cancer at the time or whatever in treatment.
Oh, wow.
And I wanted to finish it, and she passed away, and I knew I was going to finish it for her. So
awesome.
That's
we're so
man.
excited to have you here with us. Obviously, you're a Suns fan, a big Suns fan. So we're going to focus mostly on that chapter here. But if you're a fan of any NBA team or just the NBA in general, this book is definitely the series is for you. So let's dive into the Suns chapter a little bit. I think first and foremost, it's a little bit bigger than the other chapters simply because you are a Suns fan. Yeah. What was some of the most fascinating nuggets of information that you got when you were researching for the Suns portion of this?
A ton. As any diehard Suns fan that would listen to this podcast would know, definitely probably the most cursed franchise out of any of the Clippers. So a lot of rehashing, some tough memories, but some beautiful memories too. But yeah, one random stat that I thought was super interesting was the 2005-2006 season.
Yeah.
They won 54 games, went to the conference finals with Nash, Marion, that whole crew. Amari missed the whole season with a knee injury. And despite winning 54 games, making the conference finals, they somehow went 0-7 in games decided by 3 points or less during the season. And literally no other team in NBA history has ever not won a game decided by 3 points or less during a season. So the fact that they had this deep playoff run with all these crazy close wins after a season like that is just like the Suns in a nutshell, essentially.
Yeah, right.
That's actually mind blowing because I can recall that year, and I can recall the playoffs, the Raja Bell shot, the Tim Thomas shot. Right, there was a bunch of games in that playoff that were decided by one possession.
Absolutely.
And to play an entire NBA season and not win one of those games, and go 0-7. That's fascinating, man, and that's why you're here because there's some things in this book that I urge you guys go get this thing, man, because you're gonna be mind blown with some of this stuff.
Sure.
Okay, so obviously there's a ton of what ifs in Suns history. Like you said, probably one of the top, if not the top team that has the most what ifs, the most painful ones. Yeah. What are some of the ones that stood out the most to you? We know the typical ones like the coin flip or things of that nature, but what are some just ones that fascinated you throughout the research of this?
Sure. I guess 2 come to mind. The first is kind of a what if, but I truly think that if not for Zion Williamson, and the Wizards, this version of the Suns, this recent run we've had, never happens.
Yeah. Elaborate, brother.
I kind of get where you're at, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lindsay, she's there. But yeah, so basically, if you remember, when the NBA season was cut off due to COVID, they invited 24 or 30 teams to the bubble. So they determined, and I think mostly because of Zion Williamson and his marketability, the Pelicans weren't in a playoff spot, but they wanted Zion in the bubble for ratings. So because of that, they determined any team that was within 5 games of the number 8 spot, the last playoff spot in either conference, would get invited to the bubble. So the Suns were 5 games from the final playoff spot. The Wizards were 5.5. So if the Wizards had been 4 games, they probably would have said any team 4 games within the last playoff spot. So in my mind, because of Zion Williamson, essentially, the Suns had that magical run in the bubble. They coalesced. The Twins became the Twins. Book bubble.
Yeah,
bubble book.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost MVP. And then, just everything went from there. You never get Chris Paul, I don't think, if you don't have that run in the bubble.
Well,
Yeah,
I can co-sign that because I can tell you that from my background and my information, Chris Paul in the bubble is what led him to become a Phoenix Sun. It was in the bubble. It was watching that team evolve. It was seeing the assassin that Book can become,
1,000%.
and then being locked up in the bubble with these guys and having to talk and having to have those tough conversations ultimately led to a fateful meeting somewhere else after the bubble.
Right.
And he's a Phoenix Sun, and we had one of the greatest years ever. So that's fascinating. And I'll be honest, I'm a basketball junkie. I love this stuff. You're the first person to point that out. And so I'm super intrigued with what else is in this book.
Well, because the conversation around that time, too, was exactly that. Well, the only reason we got invited was because the Pelicans, they couldn't only pick one team out of the, you know what I mean?
Good point.
And then there was a lot of conversation after the bubble and even throughout the bubble of how being stuck together. I mean, you all remember, like, they did Spike Ball. They had movie nights. They were forced to be with one another 24/7.
Yeah.
It could have either completely tore that team apart,
1,000%.
which thankfully it didn't. It brought them even closer together. But if they hadn't been forced to grow in that way and bond in that way, it's no guarantee that this team becomes what it was.
It may never have happened. There will never be a situation like that again to be that close and that cooped up together.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's a great point.
At a higher level, being in that bubble, it became like a fraternity. All the teams.
It did.
Yeah.
So there's this idea that, okay, the Suns were with each other and the other teams were separate. And if I'm being honest, that wasn't how it was. It was the entire NBA world in this low bubble. Yeah. And everybody had to get to know each other and have conversations that you normally wouldn't have. Yeah. And again, that leads to that is what I call Devin Booker to me is one of the most unique players in basketball because of his ability to attract people and attract talent and have 100%. People want to come.
His low-key recruiting.
Yes, low-key recruiting. And I love to have this conversation off the air with you because I believe that was the beginning of what you're seeing from Book now. I think the bubble
makes so much sense.
Yeah, the bubble was kind of
where you start having those small sidebar talks.
Yeah. That's right.
Without throwing out too much info. What was another one?
One other one that some Suns fans may know for sure is there was maybe an hour period on draft night in 2009 where people behind the scenes with the Suns were of the assumption that we were going to have Steph Curry. So essentially the framework for the trade, if I'm not mistaken, was, this is another thing I could bring up too, but they were going to trade Amari.
Yep.
He had 1 year left on his deal, left in free agency the next year for the number 7 pick, and they were going to take Steph Curry with that pick. So, I mean, there was a moment where we could have had Nash and Curry together, and Nash, Curry under Nash's tutelage, which would have been crazy. So, I mean, he ended up being possibly the best player, the most successful player of the 2010s, him or LeBron. So that would have been nuts. But one other thing that I've thought about that too is, like, as amazing as it would have been to have Curry, we never would have had that conference finals run in 2010 having made that trade, I don't think.
That's right.
Because Amari was incredible that year.
That's right.
So there's a bit of a trade-off, but I still would think that, Steph Curry on the Suns with Nash and whatever else they put around that, if they put the right pieces, I mean, who knows? It would have been a lot better decade in the 2010s, put it that way.
Yeah. But, anytime you have these conversations, you have to look at the totality of it.
Yeah.
And one move left or right. This is why it's fascinating. Yeah. This is why I got to get into this.
Yeah.
Because how many moves would you say is in this book? Just random. How many what ifs are in this book?
I mean, I guess there would be 30, one for each team. I mean, There's probably 50 because I do little mini ones with them. But yeah, 30 main what ifs. Yeah.
So 30 main what ifs, potentially 50 scenarios.
Yep.
If one of those happens,
completely
the entire thing is different.
Yeah.
Like if we get Steph, there's no book.
Yeah.
Right? It's just fascinating how that happens.
Well, and then the age-old question, too, around that one, which Espo was talking about earlier as well, is does Steph actually become Steph if he's a Phoenix Sun versus a Golden State Warrior?
Yeah.
You'd like to think that the raw talent was there, that he would at least be close to what he is.
Yeah.
But when you look at, again, the totality, like the other pieces around him, like you could make the argument that Steve Kerr would still be around.
Yeah.
But you could also point out Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. And does that help make Steph what Steph is?
Yeah.
Or did Steph do that for that? Who knows?
You're right.
So that's the age-old question, though. Like, would Steph be who Steph is if he were a member of the Phoenix Suns?
The best way that I look at the Steph Curry Golden State thing is very similar to San Antonio, right? You got Tim Duncan, but you found a way to somehow late in the draft get Manu Ginobili.
I know.
You also got Tony Parker, right? So yeah, to your point, sometimes it's the next moves that just fall perfectly in your lap because there's no San Antonio Spurs dynasty if you don't get Manu Ginobili, 46 in the second round or something like that or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to go down this road. It's a lot of fun. Man.
Yeah, I think you could probably count on one or two hands how many players in NBA history would have reached the level of success that they did regardless of what situation they're drafted into. I think, LeBron, Shaq, probably Jordan. There's not many. You know what I mean? Steph might be on that list. He might not. He would have been amazing, but I don't know. It's fascinating. I mean, that's the whole point of this book is just to nerd out about all this stuff.
So it's also a little bit of like a history book and things too. So as you were going back in time, looking at some of the former teams of the Suns and moments in time, was there like a favorite that kind of stands out to you, or one that was like, I really enjoyed that kind of while it was happening or while I was researching it, but I didn't realize like how enjoyable maybe it could have been?
Yeah, for sure. We're definitely going to feel that, hopefully, about this team right now with Tyus Jones. But definitely going to feel that about the most recent version, the Valley Suns. But I love the 2005-2006 Suns, as I mentioned before, because you have a team with Nash, like Boris Diaw, Raja Bell, Sean Marion's still around, but Barbosa, like so many role players who played their absolute best in that season for that Suns team around Nash, and they managed to still somehow make the finals, win 54 games. The playoffs were just this like heart attack inducing, like joyful experience. And then, I would say the 2013-14 Suns are really fun. Supposed to be the worst team in the league. Bledsoe, Dragic. They got rid of Gortat, Shannon Brown, kind of the bad juju.
Plum Dog. Miles. And we got Plumlee this year. Maybe there's some similarities there.
2.0.
Yeah. And I guess I just really loved, even though it didn't work out on the court, it was so incredible to see Shaq in a Suns uniform. And I remember their starting lineup of Nash, Jason Richardson, Grant Hill, Amari, and Shaq. It didn't produce a lot of playoff wins, but when you think about it, you're like, that has got to be the most gifted starting lineup the franchise has ever had. Like, it's kind of wild.
Yes, it was very wild.
Yeah.
A guy on that team that you liked that it was one of my favorite that no one talks about. Ish Smith.
Oh, amazing.
On the 24th.
Fastest player in the NBA.
Yeah, and then when Bledsoe got hurt that year, he filled in and he was fantastic.
Yeah.
So this is, man, I could do this all day.
I
mean, me and you gonna be talking.
For sure.
Sometimes I think when you really think about it, there's a reason why we love to root for the underdog, because I think as a whole, the Suns have been that. Yeah. But then you also point out specific teams like that where it was like a lot of role players, like you said, right? I think that might be why we have such an affinity, because throughout our entire history, we've had those type of guys. Yeah. And that might be why anytime a new one comes in, we're like, this is our guy.
This is the guy.
This is it.
This is the guy.
Angel?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, so obviously tons with the Suns, but was there a what if not Suns related in here that blew your mind?
Yes, multiple. Okay. But one that really stands out is related to the Rockets. And apparently Hakeem shared this in his biography at some point, that after, in 1984, there was almost a trade in place where the Rockets would have sent Ralph Sampson, first pick of the 1983 draft, to the Blazers in exchange for the number 3 pick in the 1984 draft. You might know who was taken with that pick. And Clyde Drexler coming off a rookie season where he averaged like less than 10 points a game. So he wasn't, the star that he would become yet. So if that trade would have happened, and I think the Rockets are the one who said no, because Ralph Sampson was the big jewel in that trade potentially, we could have lived in a world where the Rockets had Hakeem, Michael Jordan, and Clyde Drexler in the mid-'80s through the mid-'90s. And I think Jordan and Hakeem are probably the 2 best players of the 90s. I don't even know if it would have been fun. I mean, they would have won 7, 8 titles.
I mean, it would have been fun if you were a Rockets fan.
Yeah, it would have been insane. I just wonder, you never know, like Shaq and Kobe at a certain point couldn't get along. If Hakeem has gets more shine than Jordan one season, what happens? Like it would have been fascinating, but there's no way that team doesn't win a handful of titles.
That's fascinating too, because if people understand Fly Slammer Jammer.
Yeah.
Right? This was Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler at Houston, University of Houston, and they had a bond. They were the 1-2 punch in America. And so the fascinating thing is you got the chemistry and continuity, which we always say. You have Hakeem Olajuwon, and for lack of better words, it would have been Clyde Drexler. Oh, and that other guy. We just drafted. What's his name? Mike Jordan. That's actually how they announced him. They didn't say really? Michael. Yeah, if you go back to the 84 draft, David Stern says the Bulls select Mike Jordan, and so that's funny stuff, but that's incredible.
I mean,
and if I'm a Houston Rockets fan, I'm hearing you say that.
Yeah,
I'm angry immediately.
Angry. Yeah,
I'm pretty angry. I'm angry for the Rockets, and not even my team.
Yeah, listen, like I get the Suns we've been through the thick of it forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother level of dropping the ball and what if, right?
Yeah.
Like the coin flip might be one of the bigger ones for us.
Yeah, you can't control it though.
Yeah, exactly. But you straight up said no.
You said no.
Oh my God.
To build the Twin Tower, right?
Yeah.
Ralph Sampson, Hakeem Olajuwon.
Yeah.
And they went to the finals.
Yeah,
so
did.
that team did
86.
work. They went to the 86 finals, lost to the Boston Celtics.
Yep.
So in theory, it did work. But there's no way you could tell. Oh my God. Michael Jordan, Clyde Drexler, Hakeem, stop it.
A whole nother level.
Yeah.
Whole nother level.
Stop it.
Anything else from the book? It doesn't have to be Suns related.
Yeah.
It could be across the league that it's like one of your favorite things to research and talk about.
Absolutely. So I think my what if in the Clippers chapter, I think it's just something I mentioned in the chapter. So, it's a bit of a doozy, but the Clippers, so I think his name was Irv Levin. There was a guy who bought the Clippers in the late 70s. No, I'm sorry. He bought the Celtics in the late 70s, and then he traded them with the Clippers because he was like a Hollywood film magnate. He wanted to buy the Lakers, wasn't happening. Bought the Celtics somehow, and then did a trade with the San Diego Clippers. So from a legal sense, since the late 1970s, the Clippers and the Celtics franchises are actually flipped. They even flipped the rosters. It's confusing. But so in a way, it's kind of hilarious if you think about it, because in a legal sense, they flipped the Clippers.
The greatest franchise ever.
Yeah, the Clippers.
So you're saying the Clippers should have everything?
Yes, exactly.
I'm saying the Clippers are the Celtics and the Celtics are the Clippers in a legal sense.
Oh my gosh.
They swapped rosters and everything. It was insane. And then not only, this guy should be the most reviled person in NBA history. Not only did that dude swap histories or whatever, he then sold that Clippers team to Donald Sterling like 2 years later.
Which are like blessings for all Clippers fans out there.
Talk about a guy making a terrible bunch of shitty mistakes.
Oh my God, it's insane. And most of the Celtics titles, I mean, they just won one, but 13 of them were before that switch. So it's almost like part of the Clippers curse is really the Celtics curse for trading their own history.
Wow.
Yeah, so that one just blew my mind. I was like 2 in the morning writing like, no, that's
that
not.
Didn't
You're like,
happen.
this can't.
That didn't happen. I got to get into that.
Oh
I
my
got to get
gosh,
into
that's
this.
amazing.
Yeah, there's more details. It's hard to recount every single, but
I'm
there's
sure.
plenty about it in there.
So this is going to be an incredible series to dive into. Like Ryan said, if you want to nerd out on all of this, this is the series that you absolutely want, and it's available on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay, tell us exactly how and where and what to look out for when we're searching for it.
Sure. I guess if you just write in the Ultimate NBA History and What If book on Amazon, all 4 copies will show up. You could get it Kindle or hard copy like that. Yeah.
You gotta get the hard copy. I mean, the covers and everything.
Get the hard
make it
copy.
worth it,
This
for
thing
sure.
is sweet. I am, as soon as the show's over, I'm going on Amazon. I'm getting all of them. And I'm going to spend my weekend diving deep. This is fantastic, brother.
Do you have plans for the next series, or are you going to take a break in between? What's the future hold?
I don't, you know what I've really wanted to dive into, but it would be great to have a little more access with this. But I think the 2015-16 season is maybe the most fascinating season ever. You have Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Kobe retiring.
Yeah.
You have the 73-win Warriors, who then blow a 3-1 lead in the finals to LeBron winning his title. This is for you in Cleveland. So you have all those factors. Even the Thunder blowing a 3-1 lead to the Warriors to get to the finals.
That's right.
And then, you know, you have Kobe's, the same night the Warriors set the record with 73 wins in the season, Kobe has his last game, 60 points. I mean, little did we know that, like, you know, he was gonna. All
right, so hold on. I'm gonna tell you something funny about that. Hold on, you just opened it. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is me flying from New Jersey to Arizona.
Yeah.
That season the sun stunk.
Terrible.
And the final game of the year was against the Golden State Warriors. The Phoenix Sun. I was in the building watching the Suns play the Warriors. Was it the Warriors? Yes, it was the Warriors. The Suns are playing the Warriors that year.
Yeah.
And when that game is ending, we're in the tunnel.
Yeah.
And Kobe is having the incredible, and all the players are kind of creeping to the screen, and they're like, "Yo, did you hear? Kobe's about to get 60." I was in it.
What a moment.
I got to double check, but I'm almost certain that the Golden State 73 game was against the Suns in Phoenix, or 72, and that Kobe game was in the arena when it was happening. So that a lot of that stuff happened right in front of me, right here in downtown Phoenix.
It's amazing. The Spurs won 67 games too that year, and people don't even remember because they made like the second round. Like, why would you? Yeah,
that's right.
Crazy.
That's
so
much happening.
I would love to do a deep dive into that season at some point and just like really break down everything about it.
Yeah, that's
That'd
fun.
be cool.
That's
So
fun.
a lot more to come.
Yes.
Looking out for everything that Ryan's going to do in the future. But for now, make sure you get your hands on the Ultimate NBA History and What If book series, available on Amazon. Ryan, thanks again. We appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate you, my brother.
See you guys next time.